why do you think that so many marriages are failing today?
Yeah, I mean that's like the $1 million question, and I try to base it on what I see sitting in front of me in my office because everything else is sort of theoretical speculation, right? Like there's so many people that can say, well, I think it's this and I think it's that. I'm basing it really on the data, the people sitting across from me in that chair. Because, by the time they're sitting in a divorce lawyer's office, like it's reached critical mass. Either they are ending it or their spouse has sent papers to them that they're ending it and now they have to come in and defend. But either way, they've reached that sort of critical tipping point. And I think the answer is like I know what everybody wants. Like everybody wants an answer like it's cheating or it's sex or it's, financial impropriety or it's dishonesty. I think if I had to answer it, it's disconnection, disconnection. Like we connect very abruptly when we fall in love sometimes. Like we fall fast. We fall in love fast. We feel connection fast. Like when someone says it was love at first sight, what they really mean is it was connection at first sight. Like I felt a connection to this person. But we don't disconnect all at once super fast. Like I think we disconnect like we go bankrupt very slowly and then all at once. Like it's just like a little raindrop, 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 and then there was the flood. And no single raindrop is responsible for the flood, but the flood is nothing but raindrops. So you can't say like, well, it's the flood. Well, the flood's made of raindrops. So what were those raindrops? And a lot of times those, in my observation, are little disconnections that lead to a dysfunctional symbiosis of sorts, like a dysfunctional pattern that leads to like a marriage killer. And marriage killers are things like infidelity, are things like financial betrayal, significant substance use disorder, the kinds of things that, like I know you have background in recovery and in those kinds of issues. And, if someone said like, hey, why did you have substance use issues? It's like, it'd be great if you could just say, oh, my childhood, or, oh, I had a parent who had addiction issues. But really, it's like, well, it's my brain chemistry. It's the life circumstances I was in. It's the mental health issues I deal with. It's all of those things, and none of them individually. And ultimately, what we're really looking at in divorce is a situation where people who were at some point connected are now disconnected to the point where they want to fully sever the connection. And so I think it's disconnection. That's the short answer. And what do you do with that? That's another question, because the question is once you're disconnected, can you reconnect? Or is it a matter of staying connected while you're connected? And that's a whole lot easier than when something's broken trying to reconnect.
So I guess taking this a step further, you have an interesting perspective because in your line of work, you develop pretty deep relationships with your clients when their marriage is almost over or in fact over. And I would imagine, given that you've said that you believe that the main culprit to marriages failing is lack of continued connection, that I'm sure you've heard people say, I wish my husband would have done more of this. I wish my wife would have done more of that. What have you found to be the things that actually truly matter in marriages based on what your clients have told you after the fact?
That's a great question, Doug. It's funny because I think there's two answers to that question. One is what people will tell me, like what they think the problem is, and then what it might actually be. Because I think a lot of times what we think the problem is and what the problem actually is, like they're two different things. Like I wish we were all so self-aware that we could say, but I think there's a toddler in all of us, that's like, I'm not tired. And it's like, I think you're tired. I'm not tired. I'm really upset. I'm not tired. I'm not tired. Yeah, you're yawning. I think you're tired, and then you take the nap and you're like, man, I was so tired. Holy cow, that's really what it was, And so I think what people will tell you is they'll tell you it's sex, and I'm not saying it's not. Like, I'm not saying, or it's, just stop noticing your spouse. You stopped complimenting your spouse. You stopped trying to close the deal with your spouse. There's a period of time where like we're trying to close the deal. We meet this person, we want them to like us, we want to like them, we want to see the beauty and excitement in them, we want them to see the best of us. And then, it's pretty easy to like stop telling your partner how beautiful or handsome they are. It's really easy to stop, hearing the praise that they give to you, even if they give it to you often, to just sort of, well, I know what they think of me, but what does the world think of me? That's what really matters. So I think for people, they would say it's things like that, right? But the question again is, what is it that makes us feel connected? And again, to keep bringing it back to connection, I I think we'd be surprised. Like I know I've always been surprised when I listen to, for example, a group of women. When I listen to a group of women talk about what they like about a man, heterosexual women talking about men that they're interested in or that they're dating, I'm always surprised, like at what it is that they notice and what it is that they're interested in. Like I just assume because I'm a heterosexual man, so I don't look at men with that kind of desire. I like assume, oh, they want like, 8-pack abs on a guy and they want him to be like kind of like cool and tough, but not overly tough and still have an emotional side. Like I have a trope in my head of what a woman wants. And if you listen to a group of women like speaking candidly to each other, like the stuff that they point out as like, oh my God, I love when he did that. And it was so, oh my God, I love when they do that. You're like, holy, really? Like that? That's all it's like that? Like that's such a weird thing. And I think it's true of all of us. Like if we think about what are the moments where we feel loved by our partner, whether it's a current partner or whether it's a past partner, like when did we feel good about it? And I think sometimes that's something I've learned in my profession. Like when someone says to me, I want 50% of the custody of my kids. I want 50-50 time with my kids. That's not actually what they're trying to say. Like they think that's what they're trying to say. Like but no one actually thinks of kids that way. Like no one actually goes like, well, I've been with my kids 47% of the time. I need another 3%. Let's get your baseball glove. We got to do 3%. Like no one looks at it that way. What they're really saying is, hey, I don't want to be a second class parent. I don't want to have like a lesser role in my children's lives than my co-parent. So really what they're talking about is like an emotional experience they want to have, not like a set of circumstances. So when somebody says like, I want to feel loved, what do you mean? Like you want a hug or you want a compliment or you want like, I don't know what you mean. I know. So I always like try to drill down, even when I talk to someone about like their career, they'll say, oh, I don't know what I should go to school for. And I'm like, okay, when do you feel alive? When do you feel excited? Like what excites you? What interests you? What's something you do that when you look back up, 3 hours have passed and you didn't even realize it? Because that is where you need to look. So I think it's what people will say cause them to feel disconnected or unloved. I don't know that it's the answer. I think we can kind of back into it by saying, hey, what is it that, like, when did you feel loved? When did you feel like excited about this person? What were they doing? What were you doing? And then go to the opposite of it. What makes you feel unloved by that person, unvalued by that person, disconnected from that person? What do you think makes your partner feel disconnected and unloved? And again, if we can get to know ourselves better and get to know our partner better, I think that's the solution.
Right. It's so true. And I would love to know, like, obviously you're in the business of helping people navigate divorce, right? And it's in your, I guess, in your best financial interest to progress that process, right? But have you ever been in a situation where someone's come to you and you're like, listen, you got to go fix your marriage? Like,
Oh, I'm in that position weekly. The truth is, there's sort of a misperception about divorce lawyers. It's probably the most common one that we want to stoke up conflict because it's good for our business model. The truth is you live and die by your reputation as a divorce lawyer. And so if you're the kind of person that amps up conflict unnecessarily, you will not make it far in this business. It will spread among colleagues, judges, and former clients. My advertisement are my former clients because people will know if you're amping them up. A lot of the time, your job as a divorce lawyer is to like protect people from themselves, from their emotional state. They're in a heightened, passionate emotional state. And they're going to tell you, I want to do this, I want to do that. And you have to be the one who goes, okay, I hear that. I understand why you feel that way. But let's just take a breath and let's think about what that'll be. And that's when the person 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later comes back and says, man, I'm so glad you like talked me off that ledge, you know? And I have to talk people out of doing things that will make me a lot of money a lot of the time. Like a lot of the time, I have to sit and go, I know you want me to file a motion and I'll make 10 grand drafted that motion. I don't think you're going to win that motion. So why are we going to do that? And what's it going to accomplish? You know? So that's a piece. But I tell you, I do spend a lot of, when someone comes into my office for a consultation, I look at it as an educational opportunity, first of all. Like I want to talk to them. What are their rights and obligations as a married person? What's a divorce going to look like potentially for them? What are the paths they can take? If I get the impression that this person is not sure if they're ready to get divorced, or if their spouse has filed an action, but they're not like in it, we have to defend right away. I'm going to always encourage that person to go to individual counseling and to consider or at least discuss with an individual counselor whether or not there's some way to reconcile the marriage, especially if people have children. You know, if people have children, you want to say from day one, like, hey, listen, you're stuck with this person for the rest of your life, either as a spouse or as a co-parent. But you're going to have grandkids with this person. So you can't just, they're not going to disappear under any circumstances. So either you have to, you know, it's either the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning, but you gotta have to navigate this person. And if that's not possible, I'll often steer them towards mediation. So like if somebody comes in and says, look, we're both done, marriage is over, but we don't hate each other. If anything, we're just sad and we just need help kind of figuring out what do we do now, I'll send them to a mediator. And I get nothing out of that. Like I'm letting money walk out the door. But that's the best way to do things. If you have two reasonable people, both willing to compromise, both honest, I'll send them to a mediator. And very often I'll get a call a few months later saying, you know, thank you so much. Like we went to the mediator, we got the whole thing done. We're still able to be friendly with each other and be good co-parents. Because if a mediator does it, they'll do it with a scalpel. If a judge does it, they'll do it with a chainsaw. And so I don't want to ever put someone down that path. Like I'm the person who, if you have me, sometimes you won't have to use me because the other person goes like, okay, if this turns into a courtroom fight, he's real comfortable in a courtroom, so let's not bring it in a courtroom, and that's how cases settle.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making when they're getting ready to go and get a divorce or they're filing for some sort of separation that just either end up costing them their mental health, costing them money? Like, what are some of the biggest things people do wrong?
I think mixing up emotional issues and legal issues is the biggest one. You know, I think the legal system is not a good way to take out your frustration and anger or your sadness at your spouse or soon to be ex spouse. There's lots of other ways to do that. Getting caught up in emotional issues, getting caught up in like battles of principle, losing the forest for the trees, you know, holding on to the past to the point where it becomes kind of toxic towards your future, you know? So, like, oh, we always went to my mother's for Thanksgiving. So I want to have every Thanksgiving and I want to go to court and fight to make sure I have every Thanksgiving. It's like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, you always went to your mom's because you guys were married. Like, but now you're going to be divorced people and you're each going to have time where you wish you had your kids and you're not going to have your kids. And so you have to learn how to do that. You know, now, of course, if your kids are in danger, if there's mental health, substance abuse issues that, you know, your child is in danger, it's different. But if you have like a decent co-parent and they, you know, yeah, they didn't used to spend a lot of time with the kids, but now you're getting divorced and they're going to spend more time with the kid, you know, that's something that, yeah, it's a letting go of sorts because your life's not going to look like it looked when you were married and living with your co-parent. But, you know, that doesn't mean that's something to be fought against. Change is not always something to be fought against, you know. There's a difference between uncomfortable and unsafe. And there's a lot of things that are uncomfortable when you get divorced, but they're not unsafe, you know. So I think that's a big mistake people make. I think people also too get bogged down in minutia. You know, like not everything can be the most important thing. I remember having a client once who said to me, he was one of these people that collected lots of things. So he had like baseball card collection, comic book collection. He had, you know, all kinds of collectibles, like Star Wars collectibles. He had like a bunch of different little collections, and they were actually quite valuable, you know. And I remember saying to him, all right, well, this is all acquired during the marriage, so this is all going to be divided and valued in some fashion. And he said, well, look, I got to keep the comics. Like the comics, like that's my one thing. Like that's my. And I was like, okay, comics, got it. So we'll trade something else or some other asset. And I said, now, obviously, the baseball cards. Well, I'm not getting the baseball cards. That's like my thing. You can't, And I was like, okay, only one thing gets to be the one thing. Like you can't, everything can't be the one thing. So I think people lose sight of the fact that like you can't cut something in half and have it be bigger than it was when you started. At best, it's going to be half the size, but you usually lose something in the cutting. So you got to adjust yourself to that reality. And I also think, too, and this is something I think that will strike home to you because I know your own perspective on these kinds of things. Having like a physical practice, a body practice, some kind of outlet, whether it's exercise, yoga, a mindfulness practice, but something physical is really, really important. I think people going through transitions of any kind, whether it's a divorce, whether it's early recovery, whether it's anything, though you need some physical outlet for stress. And that can be weight training, it could be martial arts, it could be yoga, it could be running, it could be just walking, it could be anything, but not taking care of your body, your diet, of course, people are more prone to destructive, habits when they're going through major stress, so people find themselves drinking more, people find themselves abusing benzodiazepines, you go to your doctor and you say, I'm going through this stressful time. And they're like, oh, we'll write you a script for Xanax. And now you're taking Xanax every day, and you're not getting quality sleep because you're taking a benzo before you go to sleep. And, these are the things that I try as a professional to really say to my clients, like, look, you need to get all this lined up the right way so that the instrument of your body and your brain can go through this very stressful thing and get to the next chapter. Because you're getting divorced for a short time, and then ideally you're divorced for a really long time. So even if this kind of sucks, I want this to be really good, this post-divorce life. So if your divorce is a little unpleasant and stressful, but your post-divorce life is way better for having gone through the challenge of it, I'm comfortable with that bargain. So I would say anything that takes people away from, being really honest with themselves and healthy in their approach to their divorce is the thing that is a huge mistake.